Hello, welcome to Career Launchers YT channel for CAT aspirants. We're looking at CAT 2025 VARC, but not previous year's questions. From this week, we're going to start genre based passages. Today and subsequent sessions, I'll be discussing passages based on business and economy. This particular passage I have chosen from The Economist. It's about the Middle East, the economy of the Middle East, and how it is affecting the world. Let us first quickly read the passage, summarize it, and then answer the questions. The liquidity crunch facing Hezbollah could not have come at a worse time. Traditionally, much of Hezbollah's budget arrives via Damascus with Iran's ambassador. The cash is then transported to Lebanon. However, on December 8th, weeks after Hezbollah ceased fighting with Israel, Syrian President Bashar al Assad, Iran's ally, was overthrown, with Iran evacuating officials and soldiers from Syria. Hezbollah, already financially strained, faces rebuilding without its primary cash flow. So, what does he say in the first paragraph? The Hezbollah gets its money via Damascus and through Iran. All right. So now, with the fall of Assad in Lebanon, suddenly Iran had to evacuate its officials and soldiers from Syria, and Hezbollah does not have its primary cash flow. Second paragraph. For decades, Iran has vied with the Gulf states for Middle Eastern influence despite American sanctions. Its complex economic network, spanning allies and trading partners, funded proxies, traded arms, and facilitated oil payments from countries like India and China. This system began unraveling on October 7th, 2023, when Hamas's attack on Israel destabilized the region. For decades, Iran has tried to have some kind of an influence in the Middle Eastern region. It faces sanctions from America, so it faces a lot of problems. So now, what it does is it has its own sphere of influence in the Middle East, and it has a system. It has a complex economic network running in the Middle East, which got destabilized the moment the region got destabilized with Hamas's attack on Israel. A year later, Iran emerges as the conflict's major economic loser, while Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Turkey stand to gain. So now, with the destabilization of the region, with the overthrow of Assad, Iran suddenly finds it is the biggest loser of this present Gulf conflict. According to the article, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Turkey stand to gain at Iran's expense. Iran's covert trade routes, often routed through allies like Syria, are particularly vulnerable during crises. A shipment destined for northern Russia, for instance, might transit Syria, Turkey, and Europe. In contrast, Gulf states and Turkey trading openly can adapt to disruptions more easily. Iran's regional trade, banking, and aid network, key to its influence, are suffering. So it has secret trade routes. It routes through allies because of all the sanctions and problems it has. So because it has these secret operations, it's a problem during a crisis. Countries which trade openly can adapt to disruptions easily, but Iran is not able to do that, because of which its trade, banking, and aid are suffering. Syria's Homs was a hub for Iranian goods under American sanctions, facilitating arms and chemical trade. With Assad deposed, Iran must find new partners and supply routes. The problem is it has lost its strongest ally in Assad, and it is now looking for new partners and supply routes. The loss of financiers in Damascus and Beirut further compound its problems. Oil exports, accounting for half of its revenues, are processed through complex banking arrangements involving Hezbollah's diaspora networks. So, banking is another big problem. It used to do it through Syria, through complex banking arrangements involving Hezbollah. But now, these networks, critical for processing payments, suffered a major blow when Mohammad Qasser, their key operative, was killed in an Israeli airstrike. Iran is struggling to re-establish these operations. So we have a very good idea of what is happening in the Gulf. Now, the next slide. The setbacks have grave implications not just for Iran, but also for Iran's allies. Hamas, Hezbollah, Assad's regime are significantly weakened. Only the Houthis in Yemen, over whom Iran has limited control, remain relatively stable. Iran's supply chains to Beirut and Palestinian territories, formerly routed through Syria, are now constrained because their ally in Syria is gone. Covert operations limit the size and speed of shipments while extra cash is scarce. Al Qard al Hassan, Hezbollah's financial hub, was heavily targeted in October. Israel heavily targeted Hezbollah's financial hub. Although Hamas's finance remains stable, transferring funds into Gaza remains challenging. So, this conflict has decreased Iran's influence. It has also affected Iran's allies. And the biggest problem is that their covert operations, their cash operations, both are being affected most. Adding to Iran's woes are woes is problems, are debts that may never be repaid. Tehran lent billions annually to prop up Assad's regime, investments now rendered futile because the regime is gone. So now Iran cannot hope to get back the money it had lent to his regime. Meanwhile, Gulf states and Turkey are capitalizing on Iran's setback. Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar have increased their regional loans, filling the financial void Iran once occupied. Kuwait, historically friendly with Iran, has also reduced its trade ties with Iran. Saudi Arabia and UAE are renegotiating with the US to fund Gaza's reconstruction, potentially advancing Palestinian statehood. In Syria, Turkey seeks influence through its support of Hayat Tahrir al Sham. Western officials worry about Turkey's growing control, but market favor the shift. In mid December, Iran's rial hit historic lows while Syrian pounds soared by 25%. So in Syria, Turkey is trying to influence those areas which Iran had now held. Though the US is very wary of, Western world is wary of Turkey's influence, but markets have favored the shift because the Syrian pound after Turkish intervention has gone up while Iranian rial has come down. Iran's diminished finances and influence mark a turning point in the Middle East geopolitics, with Gulf states and Turkey poised to assert greater regional dominance. Fall of Iran, fall of Assad, no, fall of Assad basically has affected Iran. Middle East conflict affected Iran. Who are the gainers? Saudi Arabia and Turkey mainly. All right, this is we are summing it up. What is the purpose of the first paragraph of the passage? Let's go back to the first paragraph. First paragraph is this: the liquidity crunch facing Hezbollah could not have come at a worse time. Traditionally, much of Hezbollah's budget arrives via Damascus with Iran's ambassador. The cash is then transported to Lebanon. However, on December 8th, Syrian President Assad, Iran's ally, was overthrown. Iran had to evacuate officials and soldiers from Syria, and so Hezbollah is strained because its primary cash flow has disappeared. So, what is the purpose of the first paragraph of the passage? To highlight Hezbollah's financial dependence on Iran and challenges it faces due to regional instability, to discuss the historical ties between Syria and Hezbollah, not yet, to emphasize Iran's role in supporting regional militias, not yet, except the funding part, to explain the reasons for Assad's overthrow, hasn't gone into it. So the best of options is A, Hezbollah's current financial situation because of its dependence on Iran. Okay, all right. So A is the correct answer. Question 2. Saudi Arabia and UAE are negotiating with the United States to fund Gaza's reconstruction, potentially advancing Palestinian statehood. What can be inferred from these lines? Saudi Arabia and UAE aim to expand their influence in the Palestinian territory while reducing Iran's role. So they want US funds, they want to advance Palestinian statehood. So, why? As a result of Iran's exit from that area. So, this looks like a good one. The US is increasing its involvement in the Middle East reconstruction through financial assistance. They are negotiating with the US. It still has not, and it is not increasing its involvement. Saudi Arabia and UAE are asking for US help. Correct? So this is not, it's not yet got it. Gulf states are leveraging financial aid to advance geopolitical objectives, including regional peace efforts. We can't say this is correct, but this is more specific because not just any geopolitical objective with a particular objective of Palestinian statehood. The reconstruction of Gaza signals a strategic alignment between Gulf states and Turkey. No, Gulf states, US, UAE. All right, so A is the correct answer. Got it? All right. Question 3. What is the author's intent in the passage? What is his main uh, objective in the passage? Criticize Iran's foreign policy. He hasn't met anything. He just talks about how the conflict in the Middle East has affected Iran, how Iran has lost in this conflict. And with the fall of Assad in Lebanon, it's totally how others are uh, filling in the role, increasing their influence, and Iran's influence is decreasing. Correct? Analyze the shifting balance of power in the Middle East following recent geopolitical events. True, but along with balance of power, it's more also about the economics, right? So this is correct, but a little too general. Provide an overview of the economic networks in the Middle East. It's not about the economic network. So I think this would be, maybe even if it is network, it is probably it's not so much overview and their role in regional politics, correct? But talk about how the economic networks have helped the who has influence and not. So shifting balance of power is a better thing than just an overview of the network. He has told you how the economic network works, but mostly with regard to the Hezbollah, the Iran and Palestinians, right? Palestinian thing. How now with the fall of Iran, now the Gulf states, UAE are trying to get Palestinian statehood. So it is about shifting balance of power. Okay. Highlight the consequences of Hamas-Israel conflict on Idlib's. It is this. This is partially correct. This is partially correct, but it is not just on its regional alliances. It's about Iran's decreasing influence and how it has affected Iran in terms of decreasing the influence and how it has also potentially increased the influence. So definitely the best word would be shifting of balance of power in the Middle East. All right, so B is the best answer. Question 4. Iran's diminished finances and influence mark a turning point in Middle Eastern geopolitics, with Gulf states and Turkey poised to assert greater regional dominance. This is what the author has said. Which of the following conclusions follow from the above line? So just see, it basically says that recently in the Middle Eastern conflict, Iran's finances have diminished, its influence has diminished. With this, Middle Eastern geopolitics has changed. And what has changed? Gulf states and Turkey have now are becoming regionally dominant. These are the 4 5 points we can say. Iran's declining economic power creates opportunities for Gulf states to expand their influence. Correct. Turkey's growing influence in Syria will lead to stronger ties with Iran. This part is wrong. The geopolitical balance in the Middle East is shifting away from Iraq towards the Gulf states and Turkey, but it doesn't talk about with what is happening, why. There is a geopolitical balance of power which is shifting away from Iran. Why? Because of Iran's diminished finances and Iran's diminishing influence. So A is more specific than C. A explains the sentence better, basically. Gulf states' economic strength will permanently weaken. It will not permanently weaken. We do not know if it will permanently weaken or not. Therefore, again, the correct answer is option A. Question 5. What is the relationship between Iran's covert trade routes and its regional interests? What did it say? It uses covert trade routes. It uses its regional alliances. It uses its trade routes. So its alliances are critical. It conducts its trade because it has sanctions in West, and the US have imposed sanctions against Iran. Iran has maintained its regional influence through covert trading relationship, covert trade routes. Right? Everything is secret, and that has helped it get over the sanctions and still maintain its influence. And also it uses alliances to conduct this trade. So Iran's covert trade routes are critical for maintaining its alliances and circumventing transactions sanctions. That is true. These routes are less effective compared to Gulf states open trade routes, limiting Iran's influence. No, the problem is these routes are less effective because during crises, open trade routes you can adapt easier. So Iran has problems because of that, and now there is a crisis, it's having problems. But the problem is that the question is asking what is the relationship. These routes, it uses its allies and alliances to conduct trade through covert routes, and that is how it bypasses sanctions by conducting trade secretly through allies. It is maintaining its influence, and that's how it's maintained its influence in the Middle East. Right? So the point is, this answer is correct, that the routes are less effective compared to open trading systems. But that doesn't tell you that doesn't answer the question asked. The loss of Syria as a hub weakens Iran's ability to sustain its regional networks. True, to sustain its ability to fund certain regional groups. True, but that doesn't give you the answer. Iran's reliance on covert trade routes increases its economic vulnerability during regional crisis. Actually, it restrains its trading activity. So, in a way, it is correct, but it doesn't exactly tell you what is the relationship. They are critical for its regional influence. They are critical for avoiding sanctions. That is the answer to the question. So, A is the correct answer. The others may be factually correct, but the point is they're not answering the question. What does the word furtive most likely mean? Furtive means covert or secret, right? So A is the answer. Identify the grammatical issue, if any, in the sentence. With Iran evacuating officials and soldiers from Syria, comma, Hezbollah already financially strained. So this is additional information. And that's why you are offsetting it with commas. Faces rebuilding without its primary cash flow. You need a comma before Hezbollah, because with this activity, this is the modifier, with Iran evacuating officials and soldiers from Syria, that is the modifier, that is the extra, and this is the main one. Hezbollah faces rebuilding without its primary cash flow. So it doesn't incorrectly use a comma, the comma has been correctly used. The use of rebuilding as a gerund is incorrect. There's nothing wrong. Faces rebuilding without its primary cash flow. There's nothing wrong with it. The sentence is grammatically correct. All right. Hezbollah is a group, therefore its subject verb agreement is correct. Therefore, C is the correct answer. All right. Any questions? Any doubts? If you have none, we will meet again next Saturday at the same time with another business and economy passage. By now, you'd have realized business and economy passages have a lot of facts, but they improve your general knowledge. The language is generally a little tougher than uh, a political or current events passage. At the same time, unless we take up some theory, the questions are pretty straightforward. All right. So I will see you again next time, next Saturday at the same time. Until then, stay safe and study hard. Thank you.